We'll just wait for numbers to go up. We're at 20, so got 200 to go. Okay, so welcome everyone to my first hosting webinar, and the nerves are all bubbling up. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Women Ed Easton's first webinar and actually our first event in quite a long while. As you can see, we have a number of panelists sitting in front of us, and I'm really, really proud. We were just discussing the fantastically diverse panel that we've managed to create for tonight to celebrate having the confidence and embracing our various differences. I would like to introduce you to Caroline, sitting in red. In my computer, she's in the top left corner, but I don't know where she sits for you. She is going to help be my technical person and is going to be helping me gather in any information and questions that folks can have. So for those of you regular webinar users, we are not going to be using the question and answer function tonight. We would like to ask you to put any questions that you have during all of our presenters' presentations today into the chat function, and Caroline is going to gather those questions, and hopefully when we come to the end of this section, about 7:20, we will be able to gather in some of those questions and put them to the panelists. So without further ado, I shall begin to introduce you. So my job first is to introduce you to Women Ed. Those of you that haven't come across Women Ed before, we started our journey in 2015, and it is a grassroots community that aims to bring together and celebrate women, not just women leaders in education, but give all women voices who are working in education. And you can see just how quickly that community, this is a screenshot from today of all the achievements of them as a community. And you can see the networks, the events, the countries, 19 countries we're now in. So we are a global grassroots community. And what we represent are these 8 values, so the 8 C's, and we've chosen in the East to focus on these values for our network events. So today we've chosen confidence, and moving forward to the autumn term, we're hoping to do a joint event with our Southeast colleagues around clarity in the autumn term. So how do we link up? And I've noticed that I haven't actually added to this, because of course there's even more than this that we link up now. We have Instagram, we have YouTube, we have Spotify playlists. It's fabulous, just everything that we represent now in terms of Women Ed and how we exemplify. And I think part of the journey over the last year is to celebrate beyond Twitter, to ensure that we have a presence for those women working in education that aren't necessarily limited to Twitter. So we are looking forward to the second launch of the second book at the end of this year, I believe, Kezia and Viv are working on. And so as Women Ed, we represent these 4 campaigns. The 4th one was brought in, increased representation of BAME women in leadership roles, just after our 5th birthday celebrations this year. So as I said, we have a fantastic panel of presenters for you tonight, and they will all be talking to you about their own personal experiences and what being confident and celebrating difference means to them. Before we get on to the very most important bit of tonight in terms of listening to what they have to say, I would like to just highlight to you, and I will put this up partway through tonight's session and at the end, if you could go to menti.com and register using the code 101008, and all I'd like you to do is answer that question. After tonight, how will you have the confidence to embrace the difference of yourself or others, and that could be for you personally or in the school or something in the future that you're moving towards. For those people that have a QR code on their phone, you can just screenshot that QR code. I'll just leave it there for a moment, and as I said, I will share it again during the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you to Caroline, who will introduce our first presenter.
Lovely. And our first presenter is Alison Creel. Alison is a former head teacher, and she actually has 30 years, 3 decades of leadership expertise to bring to it and share with us. So she supports school leadership teams strategically, and she offers mentorship. Alison.
Hello everyone, and it's really, really nice to be here. I'm really pleased and proud of the work that Women at Eastern have done. It was one of the regions that I led when I was a strategic lead, and this was one of the last things that we were working on together. So it's a real, real pleasure to be here. So I'm going to try and share my screen, and hopefully that's going to work for me from the beginning. Okay, so I always start off with who I am, who am I, and I've got pomegranates because I just think they're the most cool fruit, and I am one of those people that spends a huge amount of money on tubs of pomegranates because I don't like peeling them, but I love eating them. So I don't really come across as your sort of traditional leader. I'm small, really short. I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm introverted, I'm quiet. I was an elected mute for a lot of my early childhood. And during that time of being a mute, I think that what I did was I spent an awful lot of time observing the world and trying to make sense of it all. It's actually, I think about it quite a lot, and I think it was my way of taking up my own power. Because maybe the world that I was in wasn't an easy world to survive in. And in terms of what keeps me absolutely grounded now and has always kept me grounded is the importance of having my own values. I know that they keep me safe, they help me to make decisions, and I also would defy anybody who asks me to step away from any one of these values. They've barely changed, I've noticed. I write them down and revisit them every now and again to think, are these still my values? And I've really not moved away from them for a very, very long time. Worthiness is a really big thing for me. So I left headship in 2017, and it's because I wanted to reclaim myself. So all the way through education, I think what we have to do is to adapt to the system and to be and to make lots and lots of compromises all of the time. And I made this conscious decision that I still wanted to go on working, but I didn't want to fit in with the mold anymore. I wanted to be able to do the work that I believe that I want to do. It's my mission. It's something that I've got inside that I know I need to let out, and I want to leave some kind of legacy. And so it's embracing my own worthiness. And that's kind of started happening in terms of walking inside my own story rather than always being on the outside. But the one thing that I won't do is hustle to be accepted in order to feel worthy. And then the other slide that I really wanted to share with you is one that I think is really important. It's around perfectionism, because I think in terms of embracing differences, you have to understand that perfectionism is the one thing that drives us to celebrate or for difference to become a negative. And of course, perfectionism is really, it's self-destructive, but it's destructive for society, because it means that we begin to talk about what you need to look like to belong, to be accepted, to be perfect. And it sets up these incredible feelings of inadequacy in all of us. So by choosing to reject the concept of perfectionism. And this is a quote from Brené Brown, who I think is absolutely wonderful. The questions I ask myself over and over again in terms of embracing my own diversity and the diversity of others is, how can I be the best human that I can be? How can I show acceptance and truly live by my values? How can I show compassion to others? And how can I be a good ally? I'm also a social justice leader. I've always been a social justice leader. I think that it's something that was part of me from when I was that little girl that didn't want to speak to anybody. And I think that it's a really interesting kind of leader to be. It's a very conscious, you have heightened consciousness all of the time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just two categories of diversity, but of course I understand that diversity is much, much broader than that, but I'm just using two categories tonight because I've got 10 minutes. So if we think about our sexual identity, we gendered from birth. The moment somebody puts that hat on us, whether it's a pink hat or a blue hat, you're gendered from birth. That happens the moment that you're born. And then you go through compliance in exchange for being kept in a safe space and being kept in, to earn love, to keep love. You comply to the gendered label that's been given to you. And then at some point, you become aware of yourself and who you are in terms of what your sexuality is. And I don't understand this whole business about coming out. I know people have to do it, but I don't understand the whole business of coming out, because what are you coming out as? Surely you're coming out as you. That's it. You're just coming out as you. It doesn't matter what the label is that goes after that. And I think it's actually outrageous that you have to reject a label that's been given to you from birth to be you. It goes against every sense of, personal identity. When it comes to race, it's kind of different. You're born and you're the color that you are, and you're with your family and everybody loves you and you belong in your community and all of that kind of stuff. And understanding racism, understanding what it feels like. So racism is kind of different, I think, because what happens is you only really become aware of racism from that first moment that you witness and understand violent words or actions that mark you out as inferior. And I've got a very vivid memory of when that happened to me, which was actually quite late. I think it was about 7 years old. So given that I was living in the apartheid regime, you kind of think that racism was just staring at me in the face. But the whole concept of apartheid was that you were kept in your racially segregated group, so you didn't know any different. And then when I was 7, we were living in a different country. We were living in Botswana. And we had a teacher called Miss Bergie, who came from Canada. She was a missionary. She was the first white teacher I ever had. We were going to put on a nativity for the parents. And I said that I wanted to be an angel. And she said, "You can't be an angel. Angels are pretty white girls." And my heart, I couldn't understand it. I was absolutely, suddenly everything didn't make sense to me, because I used to go to Sunday school all the time. And I don't know if you know that there was a song that we used to sing at Sunday school. And I'm going to sing really badly for you, but it was, "Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Black and red, yellow, red and white, every colour in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world." And yet we had a Christian teacher telling me that I wasn't loved enough to be an angel. So it was quite a shocking moment. It was a really violent moment in my life. She probably just thought that she said it nicely. She didn't say it in a horrible way, but it was a very violent thing to say to me. And so I returned back to being compliant, and I actually became even more silent. I'd started to speak, but actually became quieter and quieter. But it actually lit my fire. and that the rage and the injustice from that moment has stayed with me for always. And it led to me becoming a social justice leader. And I live and I breathe for inclusion and equity and for change, because that's what you do as a social justice leader. You're actually saying that what we've got in society now isn't good enough. If anyone is on the periphery, if anyone isn't successful, if anyone isn't included, then there is a need to take action, to be an activist, not just to talk about things and to have nice labels and to have those laminated values, but to actually live and breathe and to be an activist. And what I've found is that the wider my circle is, the richer my world has become. And I absolutely love the fact that I've got I embrace my differences, but I also really embrace the differences in everybody else. And of course, some things do come right. So as a head teacher, I was incredibly proud when we had angels who looked like this, because that's what really mattered. And I have to say, this picture isn't representative of all of the angels in the school, because of course we had boys who were angels as well as girls, but it was important that everybody who wanted to be an angel wanted to be an angel. In this particular play, Nativity that we did, we had 60 kids who wanted to be angels, and it was absolutely amazing. There's one bit where they sang and it was just like, oh God. And I can still look at it and cry, because for me, it meant that being a social justice leader had brought those rewards that I wanted to bring. So I think that I want us to stop talking about diversity by being diverse, by being diverse in our thinking, by being diverse in who we are mixing with, who's in your circle, what do they look like. On Facebook, keep checking. On Twitter, who's in your school? Who are the children in your school? Are they being included in everything? Are you actually walking the values of diversity, or do you just talk about them? My mum makes me laugh, mostly. Not always, but she does make me laugh. And I had a birthday party, and it was a really good party. I don't really do parties very often, but this particular party was a big one in my life. And there were lots and lots of people there. And at the end of it, we were kind of sitting around. It was really, really early in the morning, and everybody had gone. And she just kind of looked at me and she said, "My God, Alison, do you have any normal friends?" And it's just like, "No, Mum, I only know extraordinarily wonderful people. And that's what I love best about my life." So that's it from me. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alison, for sharing that story. And I think a great thing that I'm ever so grateful for in the last couple of years is having you as part of my circle, because you definitely strengthened me. So there's so much truth in ensuring we have that diverse circle supporting us all around us. So without any further ado, it is with pleasure to introduce Aziza, who I have had the great honour of seeing. We've both shared our stories of being young leaders at Diverse Ed, and I challenge you not to be inspired by what she has to say about her leadership story. And I am just going to do a technical check-in. You're going to share your screen yourself, aren't you, Aziza?
I am, yeah. I'm going to give it a whirl and see if it works. And then you realise that you have lots of documents open. That's probably not helpful. Right, here we go. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share with you. And yeah, like Alison's story definitely resonated with me a lot. So my theme, or my piece on this particular topic, is essentially around my identity, but also the value that it brings to leadership and my actual role and what I do. So I am of Sudanese descent. I have parents who are both from Sudan and South Sudan. I was brought up in London, I speak Arabic. Half my family is Muslim and the other half is Christian, and I myself am Christian, and I'm obviously a female as well. I'm currently a vice principal at a school in Dagenham, and I took up that role in April. And I started teaching in 2014, and I'm also a trustee of Teach First. So I have all of this to bring, as well as being what people would deem a young leader. So I am going to share a bit of my story, really, and the things that I think that I've learned, particularly probably more recently, as I've taken time to really think about who I am and the value that can bring to the table. So this is a classic picture that was posted probably about 8 years ago. It was on Facebook. I just got a notification say you've been tagged in a photo, and so I went onto Facebook and saw this photo. And this is a photo of me and my friends at school when we were in year 9. So we went to a school in northwest London, like it's a really multicultural school, and you can kind of see that in the image. But it was a school, when I joined the school, and I was really desperate to join the school, I'm not sure why, desperate to join the school when I moved into year 7, but it was a failing school. When I joined us, there was a new head teacher who was taking it on and trying to transform it. And you can see from this image that it really was multicultural. Like it was, we had people from every single part of the world. There was a high proportion of students on free school meals. And so like sometimes I think it felt like we were all part of slightly dysfunctional families, but it was okay because we were all in it together. And so this is all we knew. And I actually probably didn't experience any sense of like difference or racism in this context, because we were all just so different and all just so varied that it just kind of worked. And so it was bizarrely a bit of a weird bubble. And I think in this time, I probably didn't talk very much about where I was from. I just, my identity was very much associated with just being with my friends. And I wasn't hugely, my mum just used to talk to me about her experiences of moving to this country and the racism that she experienced. But for me, that just wasn't my reality. Like I grew up in a very multicultural part of London, and so I didn't really see racism and didn't have that experience. Everything for me at school turned into being really ambitious and wanting to do well for myself, and I decided actually in school that I wanted to be a head teacher. I then kind of fast forward, and I always show this image because it just makes me laugh every time I look at it. But this was a post from SLT Newbie. Essentially, this is a parody account kind of mocking all of us young leaders who have progressed through various stages really, really quickly. And for comparison, like, this is my story. So pretty much identical, which is why it makes me giggle that this was a parody account, but is actually just my story. So I was very much involved in lots of things at school, led the work on Student Voice, was a head prefect, chaired the school council, did really well on my A-levels. I then got encouraged to apply to the top universities, and I ended up going to Durham University, and that was probably the most defining time in my life, because it was the first time that I felt different. So I'd lived in my little bubble in London, as you do, and then all of a sudden I was in this place that was predominantly white, but it wasn't just about my race and my skin colour, it was also about my social class. So not only did I feel like I stood out because of my skin colour, but in conversations and the way that I spoke, and the way that I contributed to seminars or lectures, I just felt this gulf between me and everyone else. And that's probably the first time the first time that hit me, and I really struggled. I found it tough. I felt that no one had prepared me for this. Like, no one had this conversation with me when they were, pushing me to apply to this top university. No one ever told me that, like, I was going to be different and this was going to be nothing like my experience at school. I eventually, got over those various elements. I found Black people, if I'm honest, and had lots of Black friends. And so I enjoyed my time. I learnt a lot at Durham, and it was a really enriching experience in many ways. And I left there, did really well. I then went to Imperial College to do a master's. At this point, I was going to go into research, and then I changed my mind and decided to do Teach First. So started that in 2014, and essentially within 6 years from trainee, 6 years from the point of starting my training, I took on the post as vice principal. So I've had a really, really rapid story and rapid progression in education, and I've doubted myself along the way. So I've stepped into interviews feeling like I had to overcompensate for that, because I knew that I was the youngest person being interviewed for it. And so I did lots of work, like, you know, attending as many events as I could, and doing another master's, and doing an MPQSL, and throwing myself into every possible opportunity to do CPD just to prove that I was good enough. And whilst that was valuable, I think my drivers behind that were problematic, because I somehow didn't actually have the confidence that I could just sit in front of a panel and talk passionately about what I do and what I'm about, and that they would take me seriously. So I guess the question is, like, what have I learned from this? And I'm just going to talk through a few of those bits. The first thing is that who I am is an asset to any organisation, and it's taken me a long time to accept that and to shout about it and to be proud of that. I have lots to bring to the table. I know lots. I have an attitude where I want to learn and grow and develop people, and there isn't too much of that in education. So I'm an asset to any organisation. I think that's been a really important part for a really important thing for me to learn. Experience and expertise are not the same thing as like time and service, and it doesn't equate to expertise. So I think for a long time, I just equated the amount of years that I was in education to experience and expertise, and that just wasn't the case. There's so many things about the context that I've worked in that means that I probably built up way more skills in a short period of time than others might have done. I also noticed that I've been leading since the age of 7. I am the eldest of 5. My parents split up when I was 7. I essentially brought up my siblings, and that actually affected my relationship with them, because they were annoyed that I would treat them as if they were my children. But I took on that responsibility because I felt like my mum needed help, and so I took on that responsibility. So actually I've been leading for a long time, and that time that I've just been in education, whilst I'm probably good at my job because of that, I'm also good at my job because I've been thinking about this stuff and leading people since the age of 7. And I don't say that for sympathy, but it's actually an asset and something that I'm proud of now. I read, observe and listen to embrace and reflect rather than to imitate. For a long time, what I did was watch lots of leaders and think, actually, I'm just going to copy that behavior. I'm just going to do all of those things, and then I'll be great and people will think I'm credible. And actually what I needed to do was just observe, listen, take in as much, and then think about the implications for me and what it meant for me within kind of my identity and who I am and what I value and what I'm about. I had to accept that mistakes and failings were inevitable, and actually if mistakes were happening, I was probably on the right journey and on the right track. And as a perfectionist, I found that really, really hard to do, and particularly not having the confidence in myself. Like, I felt that people would just be judging me if I made those mistakes. I'm not alone, and networking is king. I have learned so much from the people that I've met through Women Ed, Diverse Ed, like honestly, like so many opportunities, people on Twitter, like there's so many people who have had a huge impact on my journey, and I don't think that I would be where I am without having those opportunities to network. So I can't bang on about how important that is enough. And then the final thing was that, like, I determine my success criteria, and for a long time I'd kind of written what it means to be successful, like based on what I thought people would want, rather than what I actually thought, to me, based on my values, would be me being successful. And so I had to do a lot of work around kind of just rewriting that and shifting my mindset so that I actually wasn't constantly setting myself up to fail, and that I could actually acknowledge when I'd been successful at things. So this is my final bit. I love this quote. I think it really helps me understand like what it means to be successful and what it means to feel successful as well, and to actually make it more about me and my peace of mind and my own measures of success rather than other people's measures of success. And that is it from me.
Thank you so much, Aziza. And I've seen it in the chat. Everyone agrees with me clearly. Your inspiring story. And for those of you that don't know, I've seen her presentation, so I didn't want to spoil it. But that SLT newbie inspirational list of leadership is our story, and it can happen. And
Yeah.
I'm against anyone that says young leaders can't be successful.
Yeah.
So congratulations, you're such a role model. I'm going to turn to Alison now, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Hi, yes, I am. I'm going to introduce you to Ria. So Ria, I'm wrong piece of paper. Ria is an associate vice principal in Kent, I believe, and she's also a SEND and inclusion specialist. Last weekend, she set up or co-founded Mindful Equity UK, and I can see that it's already beginning to go big places, which is really, really exciting. And today is Ria's very first speaking gig. So I can't wait to hear what you've got to say. Good luck.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thanks, Alison. That's really kind. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this event. So as Alison said, this is my first one. So I'm not going to lie, lots of nerves and imposter syndrome just floating around in the background. I'm going to give it a shot and hopefully I'll learn loads for next time. So I started writing probably about a month ago. I joined Hannah's daily writing challenge, and that was really, really inspirational for me, because what it did was it enabled me to really reflect on my thoughts and structure them in a really coherent manner. So obviously you've got loads and loads of thoughts constantly swirling around your head, but actually the process of putting those thoughts on paper was quite cathartic, really, really a real learning curve for me. So I've written, I think, about 3 blogs now. So I'm newbie there as well. So today I thought I'd talk about bold conversations. So the concept of bold conversations is a really funny one. So we aim to have these really bold conversations in the hope that we eventually skip that and just those conversations just become normal conversations. And they're always about things that are really personal or highly emotive to us. So for me, when I have those conversations, I'm psyching myself up for weeks and for days and for months, and I'm rehearsing. There's this constant anxiety of fear. I'm thinking about what outcome I want, how I'll be perceived in the future. Is it going to affect my promotion? And the list just goes on and grows and grows. And so you end up with lots and lots of sleepless nights and anxiety. And just, again, you're just constantly rehearsing. So I constantly rehearse. Yolanda's just texted me, so I've just had a look. So I'm constantly rehearsing in my head how things are going to play out. And I'm thinking about things that will make the biggest impact, but the things that will do the least damage. And that's a really difficult compromise, because you actually end up leaving out a lot of what you want to say through fear. So over the last month, we've had loads and loads of stuff go on outside of school. And it's really forced me to take a step back and reflect on the bold conversations that I've had in the past, but also the conversations that I still need to have, because there's a lot that you still need to get off your chest. And so I've really started to think about, again, the desired outcomes. Was I ambitious enough when I went into those initial conversations, or was I just kind of pitching it at a level that I thought I could get through, something that was realistic for somebody else? I also thought about whether or not that led to change just for me, or to change on a more wider systemic level. So did that just benefit me and help me as that person to get the next promotion, or did I really change things for the people that come after me? And so that really made me think about how I frame those conversations and how I make sure that the conversations I have the impact that leads to longer term change. So part of it is we need to have bold conversations with our colleagues. So I call what working a system of, it creates competitors by design. So the system is such that we're pitted against each other almost from the start. And as we go up our little pyramid of careers, it actually gets really lonely at the top because it gets really narrow. There's not many opportunities open for us. And as Black women, it actually gets even narrower and even lonelier. So, for example, if a school has a vacancy for 2 or 3 vice principals, we know there's only one of us that are going to get that job, even if you have got the skill set and the experience to do it. So I always reflect back to a movie I watched when I was very young. It's called The Highlanders. And the Highlanders were these super warriors, and they were but the key thing for them is they were unable to coexist. So if 2 Highlanders met, they would literally duel to the death. And the strapline of that movie was there can only be one. And that stuck with me all the way through. So a blog by Hannah actually made me reflect this week. It's a blog on empowerment. And she had a little strapline in there, which made me kind of go, oh, it was girls compete and women empower. And I thought, actually, that's really strong because the system that we operate in incites us to compete against each other. But actually, we need to have a bold conversation and be really bold enough to rise above that instinct in order to empower both ourselves and others. So we need to have these bold conversations with colleagues that changes the mindset and changes the system that perpetuates that way of thinking. So this means we have to be really harsh on ourselves. We have to be reflective in terms of our own practice and the way that our actions may seem to maintain that system, either consciously or unconsciously. So this means that we have to really be fearless in our pursuit of collaboration and working together. We need to seek out our allies all the time. And we also need to be open enough to take a risk. We need to share resources and ideas without the fear that by doing so, by sharing a weakness with somebody else, that gets used against you at a later date. So instead of that strapline of there can only be one, what we actually need to do is create a narrative which says actually there can be as many as you like. Because as we go up the pyramid, if there's more opportunities, actually we'll be able to get to those positions of power and leadership, which then will change it for the next generation. So the other form of bold conversations I thought I'd focus on today was having a word with yourself, having a conversation with yourself. So we're often the ones that are our biggest critics, and we hold ourselves back by thinking and overthinking and just reflecting so much more than we actually need to do. Because if we just got on with it, said what we needed to say, we'd move on much more quickly. So when we are moving up the careers ladder, there's 2 bits. We've got that competitors by design aspect, but there's also the aspect of being a champion. So being a champion is when you've been appointed to a role, which is fantastic, but there's this little unsaid recognition that you are the champion for your group of people. And if you succeed, that's brilliant. We can have more people like you joining our leadership team. But if you fail, then maybe that type of role isn't for people like you. And that's what I call the frigidity of success. So you end up being, in the position that you want to be, but actually you're walking a tightrope constantly because you're either competing against someone else who you ought to actually be collaborating with to make yourself stronger, or you've got people watching you to see if you fail or succeed because you're the kind of test model. So for me, that's kind of translated in having to work much harder, take on more work than my colleagues actually, and work harder and stronger and faster in order to prove myself. I very rarely say no, I can't do it anymore, I haven't got capacity. It's always a yes. And then after I've said yes, I'll go back, I'll kind of sit at my desk and go, how on earth am I going to do this? But I figure out a way. But really, you shouldn't have to be a superhero to get ahead. and nobody should be expecting you to be a superhero. So talented, absolutely. Innovative, yes. Organized, yes. Superhero, no. So one thing I've learned to do is have that bold conversation with myself, and learn how to say no. In order to take, when you're having that conversation, it's really important that you're honest with yourself, and being honest with yourself is so difficult, especially if you've got that niggling feeling of self-doubt, because what that means is you end up being in a situation where it kind of infiltrates everything. But if you don't have that honest conversation with yourself, how on earth can you grow and develop as a leader? So I've taken a bit of time to kind of take stock of what I want in terms of my priorities, what's important to me, not what's important to the school that I work in or the academy that I work in. It's about actually, what do I need from this journey? And really, what is my moral purpose? So Alison had that slide with her kind of moral purpose. And that's what I think I'm on a journey to do as well, actually, having worked so hard, but not really made that progress because I'm too busy working and not spending enough time reflecting. So one of the things that I've done with Mindful Equity UK with my fantastic colleague Yolandi, we've created a network to support Black and Asian women in education who are at the start of their careers or training to enter the profession. And we chose that particular group because we noticed there was lots and lots of conversations about leadership, and once you're there, you kind of get a little bit more support. But as an NQT and trainee, we questioned how could we enable them to have those bold conversations. They would essentially be having conversations with people who assess their suitability for employment or qualification. So it's all well and good me saying have these bold conversations, but if they don't have the tools or the skills or the support to do so, it's not really going to happen. So we're really looking at creating and supporting those next generation educators and allies, in the hope that we can support those newly qualified teachers to actually stay in this profession, which is a profession I absolutely love, and crucially just make it up that ladder into leadership roles in a more collaborative way that doesn't lead to that competition by design. And I think that's probably all I've got to say. But the other thing I would say is just thank you for listening, and thank you to certainly Hannah, Raj and Alison for giving us so much inspiration and so much support over the last few weeks. It's been a bit of a whirlwind. We literally put this together 2 weeks ago, so it's very, very new, and we're both thoroughly exhausted but enjoying every minute. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having the confidence, Ria, to speak out for the first time. You're done, you can breathe, you can listen to everyone else, and such an important message about those bold conversations and those challenges that we must have with ourselves. Now, it is with great pleasure, and this is a selfish one for me to introduce you. She's got her lovely lipstick on and a great big smile, and it leads very closely on to Ria's, actually, is my oldest school friend, Jess, who is going to talk about the work she's done about Unspoken Sessions and having the confidence to talk about the unspoken things, so without unwittingly knowing that you're linking together. So Jess, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you, Jo. Hello everybody. Right, I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen. Let's see if that's going to work. Okay, as everyone can see it, give me a thumbs up. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you, Jo. It's a total pleasure to be here. I always love to be surrounded by remarkable women, even if it is virtually these days. So thank you. It's a real honour. Okay. Oh, can't actually move. Yeah, here we go. All right. So I'll start with a little bit about me. I'm not a teacher. I have a sister that's a teacher, and oh my God, hats off to you guys. I could not be a teacher. That is a hard job. No, I've spent over 15 years in marketing and TV. I started out in Disney and I've worked for the likes of BBC, 20th Century Fox. Gradually over my career, interestingly, those businesses have got smaller and smaller until it's just me now. I got rid of all the others. But I'm also mama to 2 young children. So I've got a 7-year-old and an almost 4-year-old, crazy boy. And I'm also the eldest of 6. So there's 6 kids in my family, 5 girls and 1 boy. Like Aziza, I'm the eldest, pretty crazy. It's as crazy as it sounds, right? Oh my God, hats off to my mum. And my parents are divorced too, by the way. But I think it's being part of this really big family, and particularly one of so many girls, I think has really made me prioritize people and connections and community and relationships in my life. And I think it's a culmination of all of these things that led me to found the Womanhood last year. And I'm on a mission basically to try and connect women on issues that matter. And the first iteration of that is the Unspoken Sessions, which has been a series of events designed to empower women and our guests with the knowledge, the mindset and the toolkit to make a 1% positive change in your life. And 1% because big change isn't sustainable, but those tiny micro changes can be remarkably impactful. Now, when I got the brief for this, I looked at it a little bit differently, although there's definitely crossover with Ria there. So I wanted to actually think about, why is it that we feel so different? Obviously, there's the external physical things that we've already touched upon from Aziza and Alison, and there's other ways in which we can feel that. But I wanted to think about, is there other things that make us feel different? And I came to the conclusion it's, you know, some of the stuff that's really happening inside and the challenges that we face in our lives that can make us perceive ourselves to be different to others. So let me give you some examples. How about our relationship? We might be in long-term relationships, might be in short-term relationships, and they might not be going very well. We might want to just knock them over the head, get rid of them. We've thought about divorce. There's no quality time. There's no connection now. There's no eye contact, never mind intimacy. It's hard, right? But we look around and everybody else seems to be getting along just fine. So we keep it to ourselves and carry on. Maybe it's that sense of overwhelm that women feel all the time these days. You know, our bodies are screaming out, trying to tell us we need to slow down, we need to stop, we need to put ourselves at the top of that to-do list. But it's hard, you know, we're doing the juggle. And again, we look at our friends, we look at our colleagues, everyone else seems to be coping. They've got the smile on their face. So, okay, you know, we keep quiet, we keep it inside. It must just be us. Or maybe it's money. Maybe, you know, we haven't got a handle of our finances. We don't feel in control. We don't know where our pension is invested. The budget might be out the window. Maybe the credit cards are stacking up. Or maybe it's that you know that you're not really being paid what you're worth, but you don't know what to do about it. And you look around and no one else is talking about it. So you just carry on. And I think what links a lot of these things is shame. You know, it's like a perceived failure when we don't know that it's happening in everybody else's lives and we think it's just us. Then there's this real shame and stigma around it. And there's still, you know, it's still not socially acceptable to talk about a lot of these topics. They're still taboo. And so they stay in our heads. But what is the impact of that? It's, among other things, it's loneliness. It's really easy to feel really, really alone these days. And that's not surprising, right? Our lives are full to the brim. We live in a time-poor society now. We're juggling things. We've got, you know, 2 working parent households, single parents. We're constantly connected online. We're all chronically stressed. And interestingly, I did that slide for a presentation a whole year ago, calling it Unprecedented Times. And, you know, we've been living through a loneliness epidemic. We're a minister for loneliness, God forbid. That is the life that we've been living. And this is pre-pandemic, right? This is pre-global pandemic, pre-lockdown, pre-social distancing. Very unfortunately named, if you ask me. Should have been physical distancing, but there you go. So God knows, you know, the true damage that's being done at the moment. And I see this play out in my own lives. And the lives of the people around me. I've built a community of women where I live. Is now a few years on, like 170 women in this WhatsApp group. Can you imagine the notifications? Turn those off. But it got me, you know, I'm quite happy, generally speaking, to share the stuff that's happening in my life, where I've learned how to do that over the years. And I would do so with other people, and therefore they would do the same with me. And it became so apparent to me that so many people are struggling with the same thing, but they're doing so behind closed doors, sometimes even on the same street. This is my street. Went out and took a picture today, because that's often what I have in my head when I relay this story, is that these women are literally battling the same struggles, but they're doing so alone. And I think it's criminal. And so whenever I get a chance to speak, and every time I host the events that I do, and you see this smiley, happy face, and you hear the stories about a close-knit family and lots of friends and amazing community, and I'm creating a business about women's well-being, but I'm always sure to share that I do know what it's like to feel really depressed, and to suffer with anxiety, and to feel really alone, desperately alone, actually. And I do that because I think it's really important to share, because that big smiley face and all those things I listed are a great disguise, aren't they? And I think we've all got one of those. Johann Hari has written a brilliant book called Lost Connections, which I recommend you read if you haven't. He travelled around the world 40,000 miles exploring what the real root causes of depression and anxiety were. And one of the things that he surmised was that bees have evolved to need a hive, and humans have evolved to need a tribe. We're designed to do this together. We're not meant to be doing it alone, but yet here we are. This is the first time that we're trying to do everything alone, and it's not working. But it's not easy, that's for sure. And to take one of the words that Brené Brown is so brilliant at talking about, it takes vulnerability. If I can just read this for a moment. Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And I think, in a way, we're lucky to be women. I know we're not all women here, but mostly women, because we've got an easier time of it to a degree than the men. That's even harder to show some weakness and vulnerability. And, what if actually all the things that we think make us not normal, in our heads, we feel like they're the differences that mark us out between other people, are actually completely normal, and they're just actually part of the roller coaster ride that is life? What if those perceived differences are actually what unites us? If I take you back to those examples, imagine if we look at long-term relationships again, and we started talking about it with other people, and we realized that most people want to divorce their partner at some point. It's totally normal. It's okay. Mention no names. And when actually you get into it, you can thank 20th century romanticism for the fact that we have these huge expectations of our partners. And there's a brilliant podcast that was released today between Esther Perel, who's an amazing relationship therapist, and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, who I'm a huge fan of, which is all about lifestyle medicine. And I can ask Jo to share it afterwards. That, really explains that beautifully, that it's not always our expectations of our partner that's wrong. It's just society's expectations that we have of one person. And so suddenly a problem that felt like just ours can get totally reframed. Well, what about that total overwhelm and burnout that so many women feel? What about if we opened up to our colleagues and to our friends, and we shared with them how we're really feeling? And then we get the opportunity to actually generate ideas together. We get to go on the journey together, and maybe we get ourselves an accountability partner on the way, because it's hard to make change and it's great to do it with other people. And suddenly you realize it's not just you, and actually you start to identify in all the women around you that also need that self-love and compassion. Or maybe it's the money. Alex Holder has written a brilliant book called The Power of Talking About Money. If only we all talked about how much we earned, then maybe we would be earning more. And maybe we'd be able to get hold of new resources. We'd get a new mindset. We'd get new confidence around money. And we'd feel empowered to make positive changes in our lives that wouldn't be just good for us, but for all women. So imagine a world where we did talk about all of these perceived differences that are stuck in our heads, how would life look? How would it look not just for us, but for our children that are growing up in this world where we're not allowed to talk about this stuff? Some examples of the things that we'd start to be talking about. The confidence gap is such a big one I feel passionate about, that we've got to close in women. All the mental load, depression, lack of sleep that profoundly impacts people's lives, and we don't talk about it, so we don't get it sorted. The menopause, oh my goodness, do you know how many people are being prescribed antidepressants instead of HRT? It's criminal. And it's because there's a lot of men at the top of science and medicine who it doesn't matter to them so much to get it fixed. So yeah, but this is the power, right? This is the power of talking out about these things and getting educated and sharing. And it alleviates that sense of isolation. I posted on my Instagram yesterday, I think, about confidence, because it's something that I'm going to weave in to the womanhood throughout, because I think it's critical in women's well-being, and then for them to all get the lives that they want. And several people commented, it's when you do the thing, that's when you get the confidence. So, you know, you just got to do it. And Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a brilliant book called Big Magic, which I recommend. And she has this great analogy about bringing fear along for the ride. They can sit in the back seat, but they're not allowed to touch the sat nav. You know, they can't decide the radio station, but they can come along, because the reality is fear never goes away. You know, if you wait for fear to go before you speak out and have that first conversation, you'll be waiting a long time. But let fear come along, just don't let it make any decisions. So my invitation is for you guys to give it a go. Look around you, have that sense of reflection about what is it that you're thinking to yourself, it's just you that's going through. And look around and see who you could open up that conversation with. And I can almost guarantee they'll be so incredibly pleased that you've done so. Now, I wanted to offer you, if you didn't feel like you had that person, I can help you out with that actually, because that's actually what the Unspoken Sessions is about. It's about creating a space that enables women to stop, to pause, to listen to the experts, but also to share about what's happening in their lives, with the intention of every woman being empowered to make positive changes in their life. And actually, I haven't released it yet, so you're the first to know, but the next one is going to be on money confidence. And so it's with my compliments that if you want to email me, I'd be very happy to give you a complimentary ticket to the next session. I think that's all from me. Thank you, Jo.
Thanks so much, Jess. And sometimes I think it's good to have a perspective that isn't an educator when we reflect on these things, and how similar life outside of education is so similar for women. So thank you, Jess. Without further ado, I am going to introduce Hannah Wilson and Bar, who Hannah has taken the pledge to share the mic with people. So they are going to do a joint act, and before they start and I hand the mic to them, I'm just going to manage expectations with folks, that because we've had so many wonderful speakers, we may run slightly over this evening. I believe it's good to carry on listening to folks. Because of that, what Caroline and I will do is we will tweet questions and ask people to join in the Twitter questions, and I will then do the virtual raffle, of which we have, if you haven't seen, I've got so many amazing books that I will then tweet out to all attendees and post to you. So we will do that post-webinar as long as everyone is okay. So without further ado, I hand over to the remarkable Hannah Wilson to carry on.
Thank you, Jo. Can I just say, wow, all the speakers so far have just blown me away. I'm feeling really emotional tonight. I don't know why, but every single message has really spoken to me. So thank you so much, everybody. And Jess, we've not met before, but you used the word remarkable. It's almost like you were primed to be the segue to this presentation. So for everybody who doesn't know what I'm Remarkable is a Google diversity and inclusion initiative. A few years ago, two women called Anna, who worked at Google, looked up the ladder above them and they saw a sea of pale, male and stale. And they decided to create an initiative to raise the profile of women in the organisation. This initiative was so impactful, they then widened it out to look at other underrepresented groups. And last year, through some connections, I ended up at the Lean In conference in San Francisco. So this is actually someone who was on my table. And the Google team came and trained 100 regional leaders from Lean In, who are global leaders, on how to be an unremarkable facilitator. And much like lots of the things that have been shared already, it's about finding your voice, it's about owning your narrative, and it's about recognising and celebrating our accomplishments. So you might see that I've been sharing on social media, there's the opportunity to join a free workshop. Alison is now a facilitator as well. We've got Buki and Angie Brown training to facilitate. So there's going to be a tribe of us offering this brilliant free training about you owning your own narratives. And there's lots of things to consider here about the kind of the social normalization and the social expectations around the modesty norms and how we are brought up to be humble, how women get messages as girls which boys don't get, how people of colour and people from different faiths and cultures get brought up in the lens that humility is a virtue and we shouldn't be blowing our own trumpets, and no one likes a bragger and no one likes a boaster. However, I'd like you to consider the fact that it's not bragging if it's based on facts. And actually, our accomplishments are things we should be owning and things we should be celebrating. But also our accomplishments aren't just the end goal. They aren't just the kind of the final destination. It's actually all of those wins we need to celebrate on the way to achieving our goals at the end of it as well. And we need to sort of like debunk and demystify the fact that our accomplishments do not have voice. And we assume that people know how hard we're working. We assume that people above us know the impact we're having. We trust in our line managers to amplify our accomplishments. And actually, sometimes we need to be the person controlling that narrative, articulating our accomplishments, and we need to learn how to blow our own trumpets, but in a sincere and in an authentic way. Doing some research for this presentation, there's actually a website called the Self-Promotion Bias. It's not from Google, it's a different part of the initiative, but it's worth having a look at because what they've done is they've canvassed a lot of women about the fears surrounding self-promotion and why is it we are inhibited in this kind of like core skill. And I wanted to share some of the data with you because there's some really interesting findings here about the questions people have been asked. So 77% of women can name something they find more pleasant than talking about themselves in a room full of strangers. We'd rather go out in the rain, clean the bathroom, or give up social media for a whole week than talk about who we are and what we've achieved. Equally, we are less comfortable talking about our accomplishments to colleagues than we are to friends and family. And doing the workshops, a lot of women have said that they celebrate their wins each night with their children before their husband comes home. I think that's a really interesting part of our narratives, that we talk about our wins with our children, but not with our partners, or we talk about them with our sisters and our mothers. So thinking about the safe spaces where we celebrate our wins, we need to consider how we can widen that conversation and how we can widen our sphere of influence. The comfort levels of mums versus non-mums talking about accomplishments. We know that we have the confidence gap. We know that we have the motherhood gap. And I know from a lot of women in my social network, friends who I trained to teach with, my sister, my best friends, their confidence took a real hit when they had kids and when they took time out of their careers. And the longer that gap is, where you take that sabbatical, that's a common, or you take that mat leave, the bigger that confidence gap gets. And it's something to really consider. And if we correlate this to the recruitment crisis, we know we've got 250,000 qualified teachers in the country who are not working in our schools. Perhaps they're women who have just lost their confidence a little bit, and we need to remind them how truly remarkable they actually are. And who are we inspired by to stand up for ourselves? I think this is an interesting one as well, thinking about who we look up to and who actually helps us find our voice and use our voice. So one technique that I share in the workshops, and Mandy's already put a comment about this tonight, Google the shine theory. The shine theory is a technique that came out of the White House. A group of women got themselves at the table, but they couldn't get their voice heard. Their ideas were being stolen. but accomplishments were being misassigned to other people. So they came up with this technique called the shine theory, and it's about how we can strategically share the light and shine the light on one another to amplify each other's accomplishments. So it's quite simple. When you're in a meeting, Joe comes up with a great idea, but 10 minutes later, Jim says that idea a bit louder and he gets the round of applause. When Joe suggests an idea, we say, Joe, that was a fantastic idea, or a brilliant bit of work. And just by naming it and reinforcing it and mirroring it back to her, we shine the light on her and her accomplishment and the impact she has. So that's what I mean by shining a light on people. And as Joe said, in the wake of George Floyd's death and everything that's going on in the world right now around social justice and the spotlight on race, we really need to consider our privilege as white women. So in the States, the week after his death, there was a social media takeover where white women of influence shared their social media platforms with a woman of colour. So, for example, Sheryl Sandberg has got hundreds of thousands of followers, and her best friend, who is BAME, has got a quarter of that. So by sharing her platform, she gave someone else her followership, and that person's voice was amplified. So I have pledged moving forward, when I speak at events, I'm going to share the platform with someone else. And I am delighted tonight to share the platform with the lovely Bar Hersey, who I met a few weeks ago at I Am Remarkable workshop. So Bar, this is me throwing the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you for having me and for allowing me to speak tonight. And I want to say a special thank you to Hannah for actually sharing the mic with me. And the workshop that I did was so beneficial to me because, as Anna talked about, having this difficulty and challenge of actually self-promoting, I suffered from that for years. And for me, I found out it wasn't just being a woman, but it was also multi-layered. It was cultural values, it was religious values, and the idea of being humble was something I grew up with. And every time I wanted to share something, it's always about, oh, am I bragging? Am I showing off? And I love the fact that you say, actually, it's just a fact. And now I keep reminding myself that. I wanted to talk about tonight where I get my confidence and who makes me who I am, and why I guess I am the person that I am. I'm a value-led leader. I'm authentic. I'm okay and celebrate my identity and who I am. And I loved what Aziza said earlier on about how my identity is an asset. It's an asset to a business, it's an asset to a school. And actually, I am all about that. I use my identity in everything that I do and every work that I do. And my passion is driven by who I am, who raised me, what my life and my story is. And I'm learning to actually own more of that story by blogging. And thank you, Hannah, for sharing my blog. I haven't started a blog yet, I'm working on it. But the two people that you see on the screen are my visible role models. That is Abdullahi, my dad, and that's my mom, Mariam. They've been married for 50 years. Both of their stories are amazing, and I don't have enough time to do both of their stories justice. But I want to give you a little snippet of how they've influenced me and why everything I do and the values that I have and who I am is based on, I'm standing on the shoulders of these two great giant people. So my father is, I would call him my goal model. He is from a nomadic family. When he was a young kid, he left his village, and at the age of 8, left his village in Somaliland and went to his neighboring Djibouti in pursuit of education. In his journey, he was a victim of child labor. He was a street boy, and in pursuit of actually getting an education and staying with this charity-led education program, he ended up losing this job where he was a child labor, and he ended up on the streets, but he never ever gave up in his education. My father talked about his story to me when I was 8, he shared it with me, and he talked about how he begged on the streets, how he ate off the tables of the restaurants he worked at. I'm trying not to get emotional. Every time I tell this story, I get a bit emotional. So he talked about how he had to overcome things. So for me, I say my dad is a complete warrior. So he met some angels along the way, I'd say guardian angels along the way, who connected him to a distant aunt who helped him and raised him. So my father went essentially from a street child to winning a scholarship to study medicine in France, Marseille. And his sheer determination and resilience is something I think I innately have, because that's all I saw my whole life. He went back to his community to serve as a doctor. And the fact that he's of service to his community is something else that we share. My mother is, to me, she's my ultimate hero. My mom is what I say, she has superpowers. I always say she's Superwoman, which I know it's not a real thing, but to me she is. My mom raised 8 children under the age of 17. And by that, when I say raised them, I mean she brought them over to the UK. My father couldn't join us when we came to the UK. So my mom had to raise 8 kids on her own. She had to navigate a system that was alien to her. She didn't have any support system. She is resourceful, resilient. She somehow fought and overcome so many obstacles in order for us to feel loved, to feel safe, to feel like we have a space in this world, and not for us only to thrive, but also not for us to survive, but also to thrive. So that's why I say my mom is my ultimate hero. And I always think, if my mom can do it, I can do it. I have 4 kids of my own. I look forward to starting my SLT leadership in September. And people often say to me, oh, how do you do it with 4 kids? I don't know how it's possible. I always say, you haven't met my mom. You haven't heard my mom's story. And you haven't heard my dad's story. In fact, I shared my dad's story with my colleagues. I did it in an insert, and I shared it with the whole school in assembly, just to remind them how powerful education is. And my dad's story and my mom's story essentially is why I became an educator. The power of education, the power of having a dream and pursuing it relentlessly. That is the reason I am who I am. The other reason I am who I am, Hannah, thank you, is the spaces I occupy. So these pictures or images on the screen, I hope tells you a little bit more about me, because I don't have the time to explain all of these things. So these spaces I occupy vary from having a 2-hour radio show, which I discuss taboo subjects and topics in my community, which I absolutely love. It gives me a platform to explore the things I want to explore. The other things I do is I organize events, I host events, I facilitate events that are attended by hundreds of people, where I either celebrate Somali culture, Somali arts, Somali excellence, which I enable young people to see professionals so they have representation, because that is key to me. They can see people that are like them, that look like them, so they can inspire and have great aspirations. I also, for the past 10 years, have been facilitating, developing programs and mentoring young women to be able to aim as high as possible. And I do all these things because those things are the things that give me confidence. Jess was talking about doing the thing is what gives you confidence. Every time I do this thing, I gain more in confidence. I become more authentic. I'm able to, express who I am through the things that I do. And I didn't include this here, but what I used to do before is I would not share my accomplishments with people. I used to be quite selective about where I share my accomplishments. So I was okay sharing it on Instagram, on Facebook, where I have my close family and friends. But then when I had on Twitter, I would really refrain from sharing a lot of what I do. For example, last year, August, I had the opportunity to host or introduce or be an MC at the Jazz Cafe, like the famous Jazz Cafe. I didn't tell anybody. It was for one of the biggest Somali artists in the UK. I had already bought my ticket before I was asked to do this particular role. I didn't tell any of my friends. So when I actually went there, I just took a sidestep. I said, I'm just going to go check how the artist is. I know him, he's a friend. And then I just took the mic and stepped and went onto the actual stage and I introduced him. And my friends were so shocked. And I'm grateful that one of my friends recorded it because I didn't take any pictures. That's the other thing I noticed, that I would do all these things and I would do it without telling anybody and I wouldn't take any pictures. So I don't have anything to document them. So recently I started asking people to take pictures and telling them, I'm going to be doing this, come with me. Would you be able to take a picture for me? But that is me and everything that I do. I'm learning to share my story more. And I'm grateful to be able to do it in a space where I'm comfortable in my little bubble of community, and I'm okay with presenting and hosting and all of the things that encompasses and who is me, who is, you know, allows me to be me and to be Bar. But I'm grateful for Hannah to give me the opportunity to share my, you know, my story, my journey, what I do and who I am with a much bigger platform, or a platform which I usually won't have. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. What an amazing share the mic, and Bar, what courage to share that story. You are an inspirational lady, and are going to be an amazing senior leader and head teacher, I think, if that's
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I now am going to hand the mic over to the only man on the screen. We did have two, but unfortunately our other male presenter had to step out for different reasons. So Stephen is one of my he is a he for she hero, but he is a hero of mine who supported me as a baby leader on my own pathway into leadership. So I'm actually going to hold the screen for him and take charge of his presentation. So I hope I do it right. There we go.
And the next one, please, Jo. So thank you, Jo. Thank you very much for the intro, and thank you very much for allowing me to come in and share my kind of allyship with everybody on the call. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think kind of Hannah's probably done my intro on the kind of pale, male and stale kind of line a little bit earlier on, but you know, I worry that people think this is what leadership looks like. And even when you put that up on the screen on Twitter, it stands out. There's a kind of, you know, your classic white, pale, male, stale leader. And actually, I worry as somebody who's been in education. I'm not going to compete with Alison on the 30 years plus, but you know, I've been doing it a long time, and I worry that, you know, 30 years on, people still think that in order to be a leader, you have to look like this. So I want to kind of debunk that a little bit. Can I have the next slide, please, Jo? So actually, I have my own kind of differences to overcome. So people make an assumption when you're a CEO of my type, a lot about you. One of them is about your class. So people talk to me about what school I went to. Well, actually, I went to an inner London comprehensive school. I grew up in Tottenham. There's at least two other Tottenham people on the call who will recognise Broadwater Farm and other bits around there. And I grew up in a diverse community, because Tottenham in the 70s and 80s, 90s was a diverse community. But people don't assume that about you. Next slide, please, Jo. And I also had to embrace another difference in that I am a classical musician. Not really bizarre, but actually when you come from a family of builders, it's really weird to do classical music. And actually I went against all the stereotypes that existed in my family, because actually nobody in my family likes classical music at all. Unfortunately, I've passed it on to my daughters. But in my first leadership role, I felt a bit of that imposter syndrome, because all the roles that I was expected to be were about, you know, words like decisive, independent, powerful. Nobody really wanted to know about empathetic, supportive, dependable. All are important, and they're not gender specific, but actually I wondered whether all these things are valued in the way, you know, in the way I was being developed as a leader. And I felt kind of excluded from some conversations. So the ones I hate most are, did you watch the match last night? Because there's an assumption that there's a certain stereotyping around that, or what team do you support? I don't know one end of a football pitch from the other, but there's an assumption of maleness about what it is to be a male leader that I have to kind of constantly reject. And I have to deal with that assumption about my class, that because I'm a classical musician, I've been to an independent school or otherwise. So it took me a while as a leader to become kind of comfortable in my own skin about kind of differences that I see, and also then to be able to share that with other people. Next slide, please, Jo.
Oh. Have I gone too far?
No, that's fine. And so part of that is also learning to be comfortable about not just embracing my differences, but embracing everybody else's differences as well, and recognizing the privilege that I have by being a white male CEO. And that can be kind of uncomfortable and quite daunting at times. And it's not a kind of a place you are. It's kind of an ever-evolving journey, and just checking my own kind of unconscious bias, and often checking the unconscious bias of those around me. And it is about how you build those relationships. And it's not something you can define for yourself. So I wouldn't publicize myself as a he for she. That's not a title I can claim. That's something that actually people either recognize by your actions or they don't. And just having an intention to do it is not good enough. But it also helps me to learn a little bit about me too, as a leader, and grow as a leader. And next slide, please, Joe. So how did that start? Well, actually, I used to work for a large multi-academy trust where one of our strap lines was employer of choice. And I wondered, what does that look like from different perspectives? What does that mean to be employer of choice for who? And what does it look like in practice? And how do we test it? And back in 2010, gosh, I'm old, I was executive principal of a large academy trust. And our English department had 9 members of staff all going on maternity leave over an 18-month period. Some of them had TLR posts, and they were brilliant. And as the head, I'm going, I cannot deliver without this group of people in my organization. So how do I overcome this? And there's that tendency, particularly for, I guess, male heads, to think they know how to solve this. And I flipped it on its head. Joe, can you give me the next slide, please? And so actually, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what it's like to be the employer of choice for a woman about to go on maternity leave. I don't know what it's like to be the employer of choice for a woman who goes, actually, now this has happened to me and I want to return to work. Things may need to be different. Things might need to change because I have a different priority or a different way of working. So actually, I just handed it over to the department and said, you know what, I'm up for no barriers, no inequalities, come up with some solutions that are going to work for you as a group. And this is what they came up with. I'm not going to read to you. But I would never have come up with all of that, okay? Because it's not my world. I don't understand that. And so actually for me, being to empower people to make the right decisions, that's what's being an employer of choice is all about, is then making sure that there are no barriers, no inequalities for any of our staff in doing that. And actually some of the things that came out benefited all staff, because something that came out and said, actually, we'd like somewhere when our children have grown up a bit to be able to go to kind of play that, you know, see them in a play, see them in productions, go to whatever at school. I mean, actually that's not gender specific. Let's make that benefit for all staff to be able to do that, because male teachers should be role modeling their interest in going to do those as well, not just the female staff within the school. Next one, please, Jen.
Oh, it's gone on pause.
Okay, so the next thing I had to do was kind of decide how to make a commitment. And this happened kind of probably sort of 2010, 2012. So it didn't come under kind of a he for she banner. So I spoke to somebody that some of you on here will know, Patrick O'Connor, and said to Patrick, what does it mean to, you know, I think I know what it means in the way I lead, but what does it really mean? And these are the things that actually Patrick helped me kind of sum up. And actually that's kind of helped me to focus and reflect on the kind of the leadership that I've had, but also how I want to kind of make this much more upfront in the organizations that I lead. Next slide, please, Joe. But when I thought about how I'd started thinking about this, it goes back to kind of, you know, that time when I was working with, I think she called herself a baby leader. I would say a kind of young, dynamic leader who, you know, a deputy vice principal, I think you probably were at the time, Joe. Lots of energy, lots of things to do, not always as confident as I felt she could be. But I was working with a school leader called Jan Hillary, who'd set up this conference you can see on the screen back in 2015. And when I was talking to Jan about it, I loved the phrase which is quoted there, you know, I'm here, I'm reaching back to bring all the others with me. And I thought that was such a great phrase. And she challenged me, she said, this is not my job. She said, I'm doing the conference. Bringing everybody with me is also your job as well. And so actually I had invited Joe and 2 other you know, potential heads from within my 15 schools to sign up for this course. I think we funded it to make sure they went. So you didn't really want to go, did you, Joe? I had to do quite a lot of work to convince Joe. Do you want to say why you didn't want to go, Joe?
I said it would be full of people like Janet Street Porter. I quite like Janet Street Porter for now, but I thought it was just going to be major feminism and all the stereotypes around it, and it wasn't. And it was an amazing event. And Hannah's put in the chat, just to jump onto Stephen's thing, that was that night that Women Ed was kind of found in a tea party happening.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, next slide, please. So I think Hannah's touched on this as well. One of the things that came out of that for me was actually supporting leaders like Joe to be more confident, to take that step, to have those conversations about why not. So you aspire to be ahead. What's the barrier? What's the thing that's stopping you becoming the leader you want to be? And that's not really kind of mentoring, that's the kind of sponsoring, actually taking an active interest in somebody's career and pointing them at the things that might help them. Back in the day, I don't think Twitter was much of a thing when we were trying to encourage people to network. So you had to kind of go and do it in person. But now I feel it's part of my job to point people towards organizations like Women Ed, and at least 2 others I've now picked up on tonight, and celebrate that, whether through my social media or in our training or whatever. And also do more to break down the kind of unconscious bias around those kind of archetypes about what leadership actually looks like. And I think the quote there from Jules Dolby, who many of you will have seen her work, indicates that kind of the struggle that is still there. And it's a job for people like me to use our privilege to help overcome some of those challenges. Next slide, please, Joe. So part of that for me is asking about, and apologies for the typo in the top, that, are we seeing a range of voices? So I've just picked 4 of the last CPD events that we've run in my trust. If in my trust we have 3% BAME members of staff, okay, out of 1,000, okay, I want to make sure that whenever any member of staff looks onto the work we are doing in terms of our CPD, what our leadership looks like, they see a reflection of themselves, who they can be, and make sure that there's an opportunity for them to see where they can aspire to, and actually to be role models. So somebody like Diana, who is running all sorts of stuff with me at the moment, she's just about to do, I don't know how she fits it in, do a couple of days for me in the autumn term working on a leadership team, where actually for many, many years, they've been quite male dominated. And I worry as the CEO, what does leadership look like in that school if over 80% of the people on the leadership team are male? Okay, what does it mean for you? What do you aspire to? What do you see as leadership if that's the culture? So again, for me, just amplifying the voices and checking the diversity in all senses is key. Next one, please. And actually being the promoter for that. So I love this. Those of you who've not seen Diana's Academy of Women's Leadership, I've had the privilege because I work with Diana, but this speaks to me, and I think I saw a quick flash of courageous leadership in your books that you were holding up there, Joe. Really easy, quick read. And actually, Diana runs courses as I've been running courses for women for some time. So it's nice to see this come together in a more formal way. But it's my job to promote this in my organization. So we'll be working with Diana to make sure that this and wider leadership opportunities are quite clear to everyone who works in my trust. Next one, please, Joe. And it's a continuous journey. So actually, it's been fantastic to listen to everybody this evening. I learned something new, inspirational stories, and actually some of them make me uncomfortable. And actually it's okay to be uncomfortable and to be made to feel uncomfortable, because it means I then have to something to do. And I have a vested interest. So I have 2 daughters, and I want to make sure that the obstacles that they might face from people like me are removed. Because actually there's not enough representation of women at the highest levels in education in the country. And the more we do that, the stronger the sector will be. And I want to make sure that actually I do something that's action, because good intentions are just not enough. And tonight is another step down that journey to making that happen. So thank you for your time. It's been really wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, Stephen. So without further ado, I think it's really good to hear that there are good male leaders out there and male CEOs who do a great job. And certainly he was part of that path. If anyone's read my Talking Head blog, I do quote Stephen as one of the people that helped me on my personal leadership journey, and I have a lot to thank him for battling my imposter syndrome, for want of a better word, really. So we're going to move on to Kirsty, who is a new mummy and is going to talk about having the courage as a leader returning from maternity leave. So welcome, Kirsty.
There we go. Hello everybody, and thanks Jo for asking me to be a part of this. It has been a real privilege, and it is my first presentation on a virtual stage. So I'm going to talk to you about having the confidence to embrace my difference in becoming a mum on the leadership team. And just before I start, I want you to imagine that you want to start a family alongside work. If you've had children before, obviously that's probably going to be quite easy for you to imagine. What would you be most nervous about? So if you imagine that you want to start a family alongside work, what would you be most nervous about? Now you've got something in your head, would you be brave enough to actually share those worries and discuss it with your principal? And actually, why should we consider that to be brave, that we actually share those thoughts and worries with our principal? Why should that be considered brave at all? Anyway, so background to me, I'm 35 years old. I've been a teacher for 14 years. I've been at my current school for 11. And I started there as a teacher and a school sports coordinator. And for the last 6 years, I've been an assistant principal in charge of teaching and learning. And I'm a proud recipient of Pearson Secondary Teacher of the Year. I'm also a new mum to a little girl called Poppy, who is going to be 8 months old tomorrow. And here's Poppy. Yes, the good girl. You waving? Can you wave? Can you say hello? I'm going to start at the beginning of my journey in becoming a mum, because I actually think it's important to help you understand where I am now. After struggling to conceive for quite a few years, we were overjoyed to fall pregnant naturally. But sadly, my first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. I'm sharing this with you because I believe this is where I began to make some brave decisions. I began to open up and be honest about my journey to becoming a mum with my principal and my leadership team at school. I told my principal and the leadership team about my miscarriage, and the support that I received was invaluable. Sometime after that heartbreaking news, I then made a decision which I actually considered to be another brave decision, to tell my head teacher and the leadership team and my PE department that we were about to start having IVF treatment. This meant that the support I received from my work, my closest colleagues, the leadership team and the PE department, and actually when you think about it, it's the place that I spend the most time at and the people I spend the most time with on a weekly basis. But by telling them, it meant that they were actually able to support me in slowing down and protect me from the physical risks, as well as protect me from myself, which is trying to go 100 miles per hour all the time. Very often, people have to build up the confidence to tell their boss that they're pregnant. Well, I went one step further and pretty much told him I was planning to be pregnant, or at least hoping to be pregnant soon. Fortunately, treatment worked, and here's Poppy. And whilst the leadership team and the PE department didn't once know about specific dates or ask about any dates, I made the decision to tell them I was pregnant when I was just 2 weeks along. I appreciate that's not the norm, and for most people, as for me the first time, they wait until they're 12 weeks. But I actually believe that telling them as early as 2 weeks was the best brave decision I've made. This means that the risk assessment could be done really early, to minimise any risk for me and to continue to protect me whilst I was growing a little human being inside me. As a PE department, we were able to reshuffle some of the activities I was teaching, so that I wasn't teaching activities that involved balls and that I wasn't teaching swimming, where I might have to jump in and rescue a student. And from a leadership team perspective, it also meant I was taking off removals of students immediately, because sometimes that can be very unpredictable. And I also had flexi hours to attend clinic and hospital appointments. So that meant that I had a team of people around me that actually almost encouraged me and empowered me and gave me permission to slow down, which is often difficult in the leadership team and in the teaching profession in general. When I was far enough along, myself and the leadership team continued to be open and honest with each other and transparent, and we started to plan together my maternity leave and cover. My role was split into two, to give two internal members of staff the opportunity to be on the leadership team. I think it's safe to say that I underestimated how much I liked being in control. And so the prospect of handing over teaching and learning, which up until then had actually been my baby, was really daunting. But because we'd had those open and honest conversations at the very beginning, I felt fully involved in the decisions that then followed. This meant I was really comfortable with the arrangements that were made in regards to my maternity covers, and I felt totally trusted that my role was in safe hands, and I'm forever grateful to the two ladies that did do my maternity cover. In fact, three, because somebody covered my PE teaching and she too was a star. And therefore, because I was safe and secure and felt trust in those that were covering me, I was able to switch off from work, let go, and enjoy my maternity leave with my new baby. Up until now, that bravery to have the confidence to be open and honest meant that planning for my return to work actually was far easier, even when faced with a worldwide pandemic. But it also meant that there was trust and openness to help me manage my return. I asked you at the start, you know, what was you most worried about, or would you be most worried about if you were starting a family? And for me, it was the pressure to be a high-performing leader and a good mum, and learn how to say no, which has already been mentioned. And that openness and transparency has given me the confidence to do both and actually do both well. We don't have to put pressure on ourselves to be superheroes, and I think Ria said that earlier. It's okay for us to show and to be vulnerable, and for me, showing vulnerability doesn't make you weak, it takes strength, and I think that's what I've done throughout my journey into becoming a mother. And there will still be times when I'm going to find it tough, and I'm going to lean on those around me in my school community. And it's a bit like, in the same way, we encourage teachers to understand the context of our students, to help them plan and understand, you know, what they're going through, to support them the best way possible. Because I've been really honest and transparent about my personal journey in becoming a mum, my head teacher or my principal was able to plan how best to support me. And even came forward with an offer for me to go part-time as assistant principal, 60% for a year, to help with my transition into motherhood and actually my transition back to work. The reason why I felt like I should talk about this is because I've spoken to a few women who have had very different experiences to me. Either they didn't want to have these types of conversations, or they didn't feel able to because that wasn't the culture in the school. And I think that's a real shame, because it shouldn't take bravery or a special culture to be able to have these conversations. It should just simply be the norm. And I hope that by the time my little girl Poppy decides to have a family, if she decides to have a family, then it will be the norm. That's me.
Thank you so much, Kirsty, and welcome back to such a successful return from your maternity leave. And I'm really hopeful that you're going to continue to work with us in Women Ed Eastern as part of our team. Just to add to the load. But no, thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability. I'm going to pass over to Caroline T to introduce our second to last speaker. And thank you so many of you who I appreciate have had to go, because we have run over, but it's been well worth it with all the inspirational speakers. So Caroline T.
Thank you. And Kirsty, do have a look in all the comments in the chat. It's very clearly resonated with people who are listening this evening.
Thank you.
Right, so that leaves me to introduce the other Caroline. How wonderful to have Caroline Doolan here. Is also a fellow network lead. She's in charge of Bedfordshire, so part of this Eastern team. And we're proud to have her here talking about having the confidence to embrace being an LGBTQ lead in education. Caroline.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Fantastic. So school's been a bit crazy recently, so I don't have a PowerPoint, but I think that's quite a good thing, because I always kind of find when you've got a PowerPoint, you sort of speak more from the heart, and this is kind of what I really wanted to do today. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my experiences of growing up, not because I want you to get the violins out or anything, but because I think it's really, really important to sort of my personal journey, and to give you sort of a background as to why I think it's so important to be who you are, especially if you can be a gay role model for young people. So I grew up in Scotland, as you can probably tell. Don't know if the accent gives it away at all, but I grew up in a very, very small town near Glasgow. There was about 1,000 people in that town, and yeah, I had a great childhood. I really did. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, as I say, wanting you to get the violins out, but with 1,000 people in the town, and with the community that was extremely Catholic, you can imagine what it was like. And to be honest, when people say, well, you must have known you were gay, well, I didn't even know that you could be gay. And I know that in this day and age, it sounds really, really strange, but it's true. And there's a couple of defining moments for me. I remember when it was my 13th birthday, and my mum was trying to make me wear a dress, and I just kind of wanted to wear a baseball cap. That's all I wanted to wear. And I don't know, I just knew that I was different. I just knew that I didn't want to be this girly girl. And I mean, obviously that doesn't mean that you're gay, but looking back, I knew that I was different. And as I say, I didn't really know that you could be gay. And I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if some of you are actually old enough to remember this, but there was this soap called Brookside, and it was set in Liverpool. Some of you are nodding your heads. And there was Anna Friel played one of the characters, and there was a lesbian kiss. And my mum, I remember my mum got up in the middle of the lounge, and she had this big hissy fit, and her words were, "Get that filth off the TV." And she obviously switched the TV off, and it was a big deal. So even if I would have had these feelings at that age, I just couldn't have acted on them. And I knew that I was so different, and I'd never really had a boyfriend, and I really fancied boys. I had crushes on older women, and when I was 30, I moved to London, and coming from a little small town in Scotland and then moving to London, I was like, whoa, like I can be who I want to be. This is amazing. And I met somebody, and then wasn't under any illusion that I was in fact gay. And I just remember every single thing in my life just made sense after. It was almost like a light bulb appearing above my head, and I was like, this is completely who I am. So how can I bring this into education? So because of this stigma that I had growing up, I wasn't open with the students at all. I never ever lied to them and said that I was going out with a man or I was getting married to a man, but I always used the word partner. And they never ever asked any questions until I think it was 2014, and I was head of English in a school, and the kids must have looked me up on Facebook or something, because they just knew. And the defining moment for me was one day, this girl in my year 11 class called Michelle, the quietest girl you will ever meet, never said boo to a goose. I think it was about February time, she appeared at my door. It was lunchtime, and she was really nervous. She was looking at the floor. She was with her friend. She was like, oh, I don't know what to say. And I was like, what's wrong? What do you want to tell me? And she came in and she sat down and she said, Miss, how do you tell your parents that you're gay? And for me, I was like, wow. And that moment, I knew that my experiences and everything that I had been through in my life could completely make a difference to that kid. So obviously I spoke to her, I told her my life story, and I was like, bleh, as well. And I know that I made a difference to her. And she did come out to her parents, and it was all good in the end, you know, and we still keep in touch as well, and I know that she's really happy, which is fantastic. And then I moved to a school in London, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to be honest, because if I can help someone that is questioning their sexuality, or like me growing up, if I had those role models that actually said, you know what, it's fine if this is what you're feeling, don't ignore it, blah blah blah. And I've got a funny story to tell you, actually. So in Southeast London, in one of my first weeks of working in a school, I started near, I think it was just after Easter, and it was close to the prom. So two girls were looking at prom dresses on their phones, and they said, Miss, are you coming to the prom? And I said, of course I am, yeah. And they said, are you going to wear a dress? And I said, no, I didn't even wear a dress when I got married. And they went, did your husband have to wear a kilt, miss? And it was just, again, it was that kind of moment where I thought, you know what, I could say, of course, yeah, and I could completely lie, or I could just be completely honest. And, you know, I remember going to my head teacher, and I was like, Claire, oh my goodness, I think I've just come out to the kids. Is this going to be a problem? Because it might have been, I don't know. And she went, what, don't they already know? And then it was fine. But again, in that school, there was a boy that was coming to terms with the fact that he was gay, and he came to me as well, you know, and me and him had conversations, and I could completely relate to where he was coming from. He could completely relate to my past as well. So this is all about being confident, and I've just started in a new school, and everyone knows that all the leaders, all the students don't know. The students don't know yet, but I will not hesitate for a second if they say, are you married? And then they ask me who I'm married to. I will not hesitate for a second to say, actually, I'm married to a woman. And I'm at that stage now where, bring it on. It does not bother me if there's any consequences, because at the end of the day, we live in a world where actually that is okay, you know. And I just want to end by reading you this card. So you'll remember I told you about my sort of pivotal moment when the girl called Michelle came to my room when I was head of English, and she said, can you help me? How do you come out to your parents? I just want to read this to you because it is about 6 or 7 years ago, and I will never, ever, ever lose this card, because for me, this is why I teach. There's no way in which I'll be able to fully express my gratitude in a card, but I'm going to try. You've helped me so much, and I've gone far beyond your job as a teacher, so I want you to know how much I appreciate that. The idea of my sexuality used to terrify me, and I feel like talking to you gave me the confidence not only to tell others, but also fully support and accept it myself. When I went to speak to you last year, I think I really needed somebody to tell me it was okay, and that what I was doing was not wrong at all. You did that, and I cannot tell you how much it helped me. You made the scariest experience of my life a lot less scary. Not only was I able to look at you and see someone who had been through it all, living a normal, happy life, but I also had the comfort that no matter what happens, I had your support. And for me, that's why I teach. That's why I'm confident as an LGBT leader, and that's why I always will be. Thank you very much.
How many times have I muted myself? I'm still muted. I am muted yet. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Caroline, for sharing that. I remember you telling me that in a different session, and it's so important, and it's really important for our young people. I know in our school that the presence and role models of LGBTQ+ is so very important for our young people. So thank you. I'm going to hand to Alison, who is going to introduce our last but not least fabulous lady. And I just want to say a personal thank you to her for still coming along tonight, because I know that she's had a really tricky few weeks. So, Alison.
So I'm really proud to introduce Christala, who is ever wonderful, and she is an executive head teacher of 2 schools in Tottenham. So 3 of us who have got Tottenham, a bit of Tottenham in our adult lives. And Christala is a values-led ethical leader, and she recently became a national leader for Women Ed. Thank you, Christala.
Thank you, Alison. So where do I begin? Well, I think my story is slightly dissimilar to other people, and I went into teaching quite late in my life, and I'd like to share parts of my journey with you. So I think I encountered social disrespect quite early in my career, and yet I wasn't able to see that it was that. So as a child, people weren't able to pronounce my name. So I gave myself a new name. I gave myself, instead of being Christala Philippou, I became Chris Phillips. Now, as an adult, I realised what I did. As an adult, I've been reading about critical race theory. As an adult, I've empowered myself through knowledge. And I now know that that racial microaggression existed even in the 70s, even throughout the 80s, throughout my schooling career. So, it led me to look at life through a different lens. It allowed me to look at the role models that really impacted my life. And I think my parents have always been working class, and yet have been able to give us, my 2 siblings and myself, the best upbringing they possibly could. I've been exposed to great teachers, family, and indeed they've all had a huge impact on me. I went to an all-girls school. There were only 2 male teachers. One taught maths and one taught martial arts. So I think by being constantly exposed to strong women, especially my history teacher, who took me to my first political meeting, it was a Labour meeting, I think she started to introduce me to what powers I could have as an adult. So I married quite late in life. I had to grow up quite early in life, and I had to grow up really quickly. So I was married at 17, I had my first child just before my 18th, and I think life's been riddled with challenges. So we've endured wars, we've endured adapting to change. So we went to live as a family in Cyprus in 1989 because my husband was Middle Eastern. It just made sense to be nearer to the Middle East. And by 1990, it was the first Gulf War. Now, not only did we have many fatalities to our family, we endured catastrophic financial losses. We came back to the UK in 99, and I think my journey of confidence, I think my journey of being able to identify where I wanted to go, the ability, I think, to process where your life goes starts with the ability to love yourself. So at 33, I went to university. I had O-levels, and I was in a position where I started to doubt my ability, but I wanted to reach my potential. And without having endured the heartache of my life, I don't think I would have been in the position to pick university at that age. Since then, I've never looked back. I've become, I think, a global warrior, and part of that success is due to the exposure to a variety of networks. I started my career in 2003 and I was a class teacher. Within 6 years, I moved to be an assistant head. Within 2 years from then, I became a deputy. I became an Ofsted inspector. And within a month of being a deputy, I became an acting head. I didn't become a real head until 2013 and kind of thought that was the end of the line. And yet, in April this year, I took on executive headship of 2 in the London schools, and I'll never look back. I didn't believe there was life after headship until I joined the Women Ed group. And by exposing myself to a variety of other women, I started to realise that my struggle to identify my successes was because I wasn't actually identifying my weaknesses and working on those. And this book, The Courage Way, has really helped me to focus on my weaknesses in order to empower myself, in order to give myself that self-worth. As a child, I think I had to find the courage not to hide. And now as an adult, and joining one of the speakers today, so I've actually joined Hannah's I'm Remarkable group, it's now giving me the permission, the platform to be me. I think my authenticity started probably post Ofsted. So I took on a school that was slightly troubled in 2013, and we got to Good Plus in 2015. I think I started that journey there, but I think I'm well into the journey now. And having recently become national leader for Women Ed England, is not only giving me the license to self-reflect and grow in confidence, it's allowing me that platform to do the same for other people. I think where I haven't succeeded, where I've made mistakes and I've grown in confidence, I feel I'm able to more openly discuss these and empower others. And I think coaching has been a really powerful tool in order to start owning my own mindset and impacting beyond. And another book that's helped me take the leap and helped me understand that it's okay to make those mistakes as long as I'm true to my values, which was tested, I think, last year. And I think my only message is, if you are uncomfortable, if your values aren't being fulfilled, it's okay to move on. There is life beyond that discomfort. And I think I'm in the happiest place I've ever been. I don't think my job is easy. I think it's a tough job. But I think the smile I wear shows that I now have complete ownership of my situation. I have complete ownership of not only my staff, of an entire community. So I think the world is really full of so many possibilities, and I think we need to stand up and be proud. I think we create space. I don't want to have a plan B. I think having a plan B almost accepts defeat, and I won't be defeated. So I think I'm going to continue to be proud of my authenticity. I'm going to continue to build my colleagues up, regardless of their gender, but especially women. I'm going to continue to celebrate and acknowledge the fact that, yes, I'm an authentic warrior, and yes, I'm going to do things my way, because my way works. So I'm going to end on that. I know I've got the graveyard slot, and I don't want to continue too long, but I think each time I succeeded in my career, I've grown, but I think that was only made possible because of the mistakes I made. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to try and see if I can get back to where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristana, for not doing the graveyard. What a brilliant end to an inspiring evening. Fantastic presenters. I would like to thank you all for sticking with us. Note to self, the next webinar that I jointly organise with my other colleagues in Women Ed Eastern is that we may have 2 hours or less speakers, but it's been, and I think it's been just so fulfilling for everyone. So, as I said, I will tweet any questions, although I think we've picked them up actually, a lot of them in the threads of stuff. The raffle, I will tweet the prizes out, and there are some fabulous ones, and I think we've heard Take the Leap a lot, and we've got Jill's book. Thank you, Jill. I know that she's been and seen her within the webinar tonight. So anyone that gets that, who's thinking about headship, it's a brilliant book to read. But if you can take the opportunity, please, to go to menti.com and just answer this question: how will you have the confidence to embrace the difference of yourself or others? And I will record and put out those comments of what you guys have pledged. And I will send emails to all attendees. I think a number of people haven't managed to attend tonight, but we are recording, and through the hope of technology and the love of Jules Dolby and other people and Kate Brown, I will hopefully get it up to the YouTube channel, providing I've recorded it properly. So thank you all for your time. It has been an absolute honour, and for bearing with me as I host, and for Caroline, who has helped me keep an eye on the chat and in the background. It's been a truly amazing event. Have a lovely evening.
Oh, thank you, Jo.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jo.
Great job.
Great job, Jo.
Well done.
Thank you.
Wow, guys, that was amazing.
Thank you, Hannah.